Hey everybody, it's Alex Fabrega coming at you with another Teaching Tips Tuesday, and I have with me again Miss Melanie Audet, a TVI and Orientation and Mobility Specialist from the Foundation for Blind Children. How you doing today, Mel?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for coming on with us again today. We have a very important topic to discuss, something that we see asked a lot around the internet, and that is, how do you get accommodations for the SAT and the ACT? Do you have experience taking care of this?
Actually, I do. I had a student who was a Braille reader a couple of years ago who was planning to take the SAT, and so I got to go through the whole process with her, so I'm pretty familiar.
Perfect. All right. Well, then let's go ahead and get started with the ACT. ACT. How do you go about requesting accommodations for that?
Sure. So with the SAT and the ACT, they are two different organizations. So College Board manages the SAT, and then ACT, which stands for American College Test, is its own. So when registering for the ACT, basically the first thing you want to do is get in touch with the high school. So normally every school should have like a point person that knows the process, understands any changes that have occurred every year. So I think that's the most important thing, is first get in touch with the high school and the student's case manager to be able to kind of figure out how do we use these accommodations on this test. So once you get them in the loop, then you would create an account with ACT, and then for ACT specifically, to register for accommodations, they would fill out an ACT assessment application if they needed just extended time. So there is the assessment application for extended time national testing. But then if the student requires other accommodations such as Braille, personal reader, they would be filling out a request for the ACT special testing. So there's a couple of different things that you would need to do. That's why it's really important to have the high school.
Okay. That makes sense about the ACT. Now, what about the SAT?
So for the SAT, same thing, want to include the high school. You're going to create an account, and the College Board that administers the SAT, the PSAT, as well as AP tests and other standardized tests. They offer services for students with disabilities, also known as SSD, and you can find their eligibility form on their website. And it has to be signed by the school, the student, and the parent or the guardian. And then you'll register for it online. Then you will receive an email regarding the decision regarding the request for the accommodations, and it will be available on the student account. So all of these things really need to happen, though, in the spring of the student's junior year. It's really important to get that rolling early. So, the junior year, when student has their IEP, coming together as a team, making sure that you have all the accommodations that you need in the IEP. That way it will translate over very easily when you're applying for the accommodations on the SAT or the ACT. So
Okay.
typically it could be about 7 to 8 weeks until from when you applied for the accommodations to be able to receive a decision on them. So you want to leave buffer time in case for some reason one of the accommodations that's really necessary for the student, which I did have this happen, one of the accommodations was not approved, and it was really important that this student was a Braille reader and they really needed this accommodation. So we had to resubmit. So all of that can take a long time, and especially if the student plans to take their test more than once, you want to make sure that you're doing it well in advance because there's specific dates for the testing.
Okay. All right. Do you have what are some examples of other accommodations you could get? You mentioned Braille. You mentioned a personal reader. What other kind of things could a student request?
Sure. So there's a lot of accommodations that you can get, and there's a pretty good list. So things like large print, the ability to mark your answers in a large print booklet, so without having the bubbled answer sheet, extended time, multiple day testing, small group testing. You could have a writer, a Braille version of the test, as I mentioned, or a computer to record written responses. Things like visual magnification, so using a CCTV, as long as it doesn't have recording features, as well as verbal responses dictated to a scribe. So, and assistive technology, so speech to text access. So there's a lot of accommodations, but some of them aren't going to be available at those national test centers. So those would be things that are only available at that local school. So that would be why you need to incorporate the school into the whole communication pattern. So things that would be just out of school accommodations would be extended time, personal reader, a rider, braille version of the test, or a computer. So something like large print you could get at the National Test Center.
Okay. All right. Well, then I have one last question for you because I don't think I started asking this last time you were on. What is your favorite part of your job?
I would say my favorite part of my job is when I see students say something, about something that they learned that they didn't know that they could do that. That is probably my favorite thing, is whether it's they're learning how to participate in an extracurricular activity that they didn't know they could be a part of, or they're learning how to use all of these keyboard commands, or they're learning Braille. Whenever they find something that they didn't know how to do before, and they're excited about that they know how to do it now. That's probably my favorite part about teaching.
We do the impossible.
Yes.
All right.
And I
Well,
wanted to ask, do you have any tips for anyone taking the SAT or ACT? Do you remember what it was like?
stressful. There was so much pressure on it. I remember you really want to get a good night's sleep the night before, which can be hard if you're nervous. And I remember really feeling like I needed to have the best, most nutritious breakfast I could possibly get to fuel my brain for it.
Yeah, that was the one thing that I always had a tip when I found in college, because I took the ACT SAT maybe 11 years ago, which is crazy. But for when I was in college taking other tests like the GRE or the professional knowledge test to get our teacher certification, I remember researching and finding that blueberries helps improve mental performance and memory. So I took some blueberries mornings before my tests in college, and I wish I had taken them in high school, but could be the placebo effect, but I still think it helped. So if
Absolutely.
nervous, make sure to have a bowl of blueberries before you take your test.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for watching another Teaching Tips Tuesday. We're going to have a few links in the description of this video to different sources related to getting those accommodations for those tests. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments below, and we'll see you next week.